When James Cameron's blockbuster film The Terminator hit screens in 1982, video games were just starting to become a sophisticated medium. Licensed titles were a relatively new concept, as the Tron video game, the first movie licensed game, had came out the same year. It took all the way until 1991 for there to be a Terminator game, which was a far too ambitious first-person open-world game developed by Bethesda. It was slow and kinda empty-feeling, not to mention complicated controls, few sound effects, and no music. It did have a few cool ideas, though, such as the ability to rob and shoplift at all the local businesses. You could steal cars, run away from the police, and more. You had the ability to play as either the Terminator or Reese and Sarah. All of this was happening in a roughly accurate map of the streets of LA. Basically being first-person Grand Theft Auto with the Terminator, but it looks like an 80s flight simulator. The technology just wasn't there yet. But with the release of Doom 2 years later, things started to look a bit different for first-person gaming. A ton of clones of Doom were made, and eventually ones that pushed the boundaries of the genre. Games such as Descent and Marathon added everything from 3D enemies to more flexible level layout and free look. All of these things contributed to the continued success of the genre. Bethesda Softworks had made another Terminator-based FPS game, which was called Terminator Rampage, which came out in 1993. It was basically a Wolfenstein clone, but it was a step in the right direction. But at last, in 1995, there was a Terminator game announced that seemed to get the formula right. This is today's topic, the Terminator Future Shock. This game is kind of like Delta Force, but set in the post-apocalyptic world of the Terminator films. It somehow got away with a teen rating despite the heavy amount of violence and the corpses that litter all the game's stages, though that's probably due to the lack of bloodshed happening on screen and the pixelation of the corpses in various states of decay and dismemberment. It's overall a pretty eerie game which has jump scares due to the quick, unnatural movements of all the enemies. I'm not sure if this was unintentional or not, but walking through the city's quiet streets with killer robot skeletons chasing you is kinda scary. You turn a corner and BAM! You're touching faces with a Terminator. Or better yet, the fact that nearly every item in this game explodes if shot accidentally. Cars, empty boxes, and even couches create a huge fiery explosion when shot. The worst part is all items cause your bullets to ricochet back at you when fired at in close range. The hitboxes on items are pretty crappy, so expect to take a lot of damage for shooting things that are 3 feet to your left. Not to mention, the enemies are really hard to hit. If you encounter one of those tiny drones, you're pretty much screwed unless you have something that fires explosives. Even when you have the shotgun and have the cursor right on them, you can't hit them. Also, the shotgun sucks. It doesn't shoot in a spread, it just fires a single point, and doesn't do a lot of damage. In the movies, shotguns were the anti-Terminator weapon of choice, as it blew a lot of their disguise off in addition to knocking them around a bit. They do neither in the game. Even the Terminator Rampage had where you could shoot the Terminator's flesh off, but not in this one. Which brings me to another point. It feels like the developers never watched the Terminator movies or something. The only cool thing from the movies that is carried over is the theme, which is on the title screen, and also used during the stages but given a spooky, echoey sound to it. And I gotta say, it's pretty cool. But it's basically the only other thing that you will hear other than crackling fires, gunshots, and whirring robot noises, which is another thing I don't like. Why do the Terminators make such loud noises in the game? It defeats the purpose of them trying to look like people when they sound like a freaking dot matrix printer. Even if the game has a lot of issues, there's still a lot of upsides to it. For starters, it tries to be an open-world 3D apocalypse game with all sights and hazards you could possibly desire. Everything from burning garbage heaps to bomb craters to crumbling buildings are mapped out in full 3D. You can enter any building that has a visible door and explore it. It's a pretty cool feeling to be able to go inside abandoned stores and offices, loot them, and wonder what types of places they were before Judgment Day. The buildings are a welcome break from the main missions, as there are usually few enemies inside. I think this game gets the feeling of the apocalyptic scenes in the movies down pretty well, since those scenes always felt empty and trivial to me anyways. I always liked the parts that took place in modern day far more. I think that the best way to do a Terminator game would be to mix the original one with the advancements in Future Shock. For some reason, no such game exists, even though I thought it would be a no-brainer to have a decent 3D game that takes place during the events of the first film. They always want to make Terminator games take place during the apocalypse or the events of whatever film in the series just came out. All the games based on the first movie either are shovelware or the technology just wasn't there yet. I think that while this game is alright, it just feels like they didn't care about bug testing or the IP itself. And this came from freaking Bethesda. Yeah, the ones that made all those successful Fallout games made this crap. And I don't understand why it's so bland, since they clearly knew how to make an apocalyptic wasteland feel alive and thrilling. Somehow. I give this clunky empty game a 6 out of 10. I would give the first game the same score. They both have bad controls and are kinda ugly and just don't feel like the Terminator. I think that a new Terminator game needs to be made, but not by them. I think Rockstar Games should handle it instead. Basically, Grand Theft Auto, but you can play as either the Terminator or as Reese and Sarah. Similar to the first game, but not a piece of crap. It would make a pretty good local co-op game if you could play as Sarah and Reese in split-screen mode, or versus mode, where one player hunts down the other in an accurate recreation of LA. Anyways, it's all hypothetical, but I think it could work since Rockstar is such a big company now. They would have the budget and knowledge for this idea more than anybody else would. Tell me what you thought of this review and how you think the Terminator should be treated in future games. I'm curious what you'll say, as everyone seems to have a totally different opinion when it comes to the Terminator franchise. I'll be seeing you all in the comments below and in the next video. Bye.